Good everyone, and welcome to the June 8th, 2022 MassTimber webinar, MassTimber Takeaways for Michigan. This is a report back from the International MassTimber Conference, which was in Portland, Oregon in April. I'm Sandra Lupien, and I lead the program MassTimber at MSU. We are based at Michigan State University, and we really work to mobilize research, education, communications, outreach, thinking about policy in order to advance mass timber construction, as well as realize mass timber manufacture here in Michigan and in the surrounding region. We're a partnership across the School of Planning, Design, and Construction, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. So thanks to all those folks and those partners. We co-produced this webinar series with the Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute, MIFB, which actually founded this webinar series. MIFB is a nonprofit organization, entirely volunteer run, that considers itself a convener and an educator in Michigan, specifically around fostering sustainable forests, communities, and economies through innovative and responsible production, use, and recycling of forest biomaterials. So thanks to our friends at MIFB for that partnership, and I know some of you are here on the webinar. So some logistics before we get started. Anyone who's joined the webinar as a guest today is muted. Your video is off, and so when it's time to ask questions and answers, we ask you to use either the Q&A feature, or you can type your questions into the chat. We'll wait until after we go through a conversation with our panelists to take questions, but you're welcome to type them in at any time and we will be tracking those. So thanks for that. So let me just start by queuing up the conversation that we're going to have today. And this is going to be a little bit of a different format than we typically do in these webinars. It will be very conversational, kind of like a talk show a little bit. So we're not going to have slide presentations or anything like that. It's going to be conversational, so a little bit more informal. But in April, I had the great pleasure of leading a delegation of Michiganders to attend the International MassTimber Conference in Portland, Oregon. This annual event is essentially the premier mass timber conference in the United States and probably in the world. About 2,000 people attended the conference in total. So I really wanted to bring together a group of diverse people representing diverse sectors from Michigan to learn together about mass timber, to generate more excitement about mass timber, to basically expand our knowledge base in Michigan, as well as to bring these folks together to kind of cross-pollinate, expand their networks, and perhaps see opportunities to collaborate that they wouldn't otherwise see unless they were together in the same place. So the Michigan Department of Natural Resources provided some funding to help offset parts of the registration fees for up to 12 participants. And I have to say that when I started thinking about bringing together a group, I thought, oh, it would be amazing if we had a dozen people from Michigan attend this conference. What a great big group that would be. Well, it seemed like there was more interest than that. We ended up having a group of more than 50 people register for the International Mass Timber Conference from Michigan. That's about 2.5% of the total conference attendance. So a significant share of that group comprised Michiganders. And this was a very diverse delegation from the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, housing developers, forest products industry, a few NGOs, state government folks, as well as folks from academia, including both faculty and students. We had 3 students from our forestry undergraduate program, as well as a graduate student from our construction management program attended. And all of these folks joined together to expand their mass timber knowledge and networks. And a group of these folks, we're very excited, is joining us today to share with you some of their key insights and takeaways. So normally I would love to introduce everybody up front, but since we have 5 wonderful panelists today, it's a lot of folks, and less than an hour to hear their valuable insights, I'm going to ask each of you panelists to start by introducing yourself. You'll tell us your name, where you work, and since our audience, like all of you, represents diverse sectors, to give us a bit of context just about like what your company and your organization and you do there. So I'd like to start with Paulina. So Paulina, if you can unmute and do that introduction, we'd love that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paulina Reyes. I am a designer and an architect with Rossetti, which is an architecture firm based out of Detroit. We've been in Michigan for a little over 50 years, and we specialize in, well, we do a host of different work, but we specialize mostly in sports and hospitality. So I've been there for about 3 years, and I'm also spearheading our internal sustainability lab. So that's been my involvement with MassTimber.
Thanks, Paulina. John.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Stimson. I work for Homestretch, a nonprofit housing developer, and we are a community housing development organization formed in 1996 using seed money from Fannie Mae and MSHDA. Our focus is on affordable housing and small-scale incremental steps. To date, we've developed over 160 properties, expanded about $17 million. We're growing. I say we do small scale, but this new project that we're embarking upon in Traverse City will certainly put us on the map with a new timber structure. And that's sort of the purpose of why I came to the seminar. But my responsibilities and roles are site analysis, pre-development financing. I do feasibility studies, plan approvals, and then we also happen to be a general contractor. So we are a licensed general contractor that allows us to hire and fire subs and put our structures up, utilizing years of the trade's experience. And that's something that's poignant to a lot of nonprofits, that they're subject to other for-profit contractors. We're unique in the sense that we do it all, from concept to groundbreaking and construction, and then lease up, and then we are a property manager as well. So lots of good stuff about Homestretch, and I look forward to being part of this webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Traci.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining today. And thanks, Sandra, for pulling this together and inviting me. I'm excited to be a part of this initiative to bring more awareness to mass timber construction and ultimately lead to building more mass timber projects in Michigan. I'm a senior estimator planner at Clark Construction Company. So the best use of my skills is when I'm brought into a project very early. This could be as early as helping to set the budget. But if this stage is already passed, if I could start at the conceptual stage, that would be fabulous. This way I'm able to work collaboratively with the design team and the project owner to add as much value to the project at an early stage. So Clark Construction Company is a construction manager, and we operate in Alla, Michigan. Our headquarters is in Lansing, and we currently have offices in both Alpena and Auburn Hills. We work in all market segments, some including higher education, K-12, healthcare, office, retail, and correctional facilities are just a few of those. So we're continuously researching ways to add value to our projects, and mass timber is just one option that could be great for many projects. So I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Traci. And Marc.
All right, hello everybody, and again, to Sandra and team, thank you for putting this together. As Sandra said, I am Marc Blom. I am the Vice President and CFO for JM Longyear, better known as Longyear Corporation. We're a 150-year-old asset manager with interest across the board in terms of many different areas, but including medical device, mineral rights, timberlands, and real estate. But the largest part of our business is forest products. And so we, as we said, we harvest approximately 600,000 green tons a year from not only our own timberlands, but from private industry or private landowners as well. Own harvesting and transportation business that goes along with that. And then we have a hardwood lumber mills, 2 locations that produce kiln-dried hardwood lumber in the Upper Peninsula. So it was great. We've heard a lot about mass timber over the years. It was great when Sandra asked us to go. We're always looking for, I'd say, new areas to invest in. And with the resource that we have here in the Upper Peninsula and throughout the state of Michigan, it seems like a perfect opportunity for us to definitely continue learning about it. So we've been excited. I think, as Sandra, as I told you, this is the most I want to say the most interest I've seen in this in a long time, and I'll call it my 10 years back in this industry. So nice job putting this together, and look forward to the discussion today.
Thanks so much, Marc. And Todd.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on the webinar. My name is Todd Sandy. I'm Director of Training for the Michigan Statewide Carpenters and Millwrights Joint Apprenticeship and Training Fund. We service the training needs for the Michigan Regional Council of Carpenters and Millwrights. We have 6 training centers statewide, roughly 500 contractors that are signatory to us, and membership is about 15,000 with about 1,200 current apprentices. So 3 of our buildings are new as of 2019, and just getting ready to kick off open up a new building in Detroit with a grand opening ceremony next week. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Todd. So audience, as you can hear and see, we have a panel with a breadth and depth of experience that's really exciting. So you're going to hear a lot of different perspectives about MassTimber takeaways on this call. So to get us started, first I'm going to get rid of these slides so you can see everybody's faces. I think that's what I'm going to do. I meant to stop sharing. Here we go. You can probably see my emails now, but hopefully that will stop. Great. So now looks like you can see everybody's face. The slides are gone. Let's now have a conversation. So I'll kick it off by asking this question. So, and some of you touched on this a little bit, but maybe a little bit more detail here. So how are you and or your employer engaged with MassTimber at this time, and what really motivated you, and in some cases some of your colleagues too, to spend your valuable time at the International MassTimber Conference? And I'd like to start off with our architecture, engineering, and construction industry panelists. So Traci first, then Paulina.
So yes, Sandra, thank you for the invite to the conference. That was great that you pulled this all together. I'm personally working on a couple K-12 projects, and I reached out to MSU and Sandra and George Berghorn for some insight based on their experience with the STEM construction building. And so I just was looking for more information as we work through planning for these projects. They're at the schematic design level right now, and we're working on budgeting, and all of the information gained was very helpful.
Thanks, Traci. And Paulina, how about you? Talk a little bit about Rossetti's engagement with MassTimber and what made you go to the conference.
Right, so Rossetti is currently in conceptual or schematic design of multiple projects, with MassTimber being proposed as the primary structure for all or parts of the building. We became engaged with MassTimber through our sustainability lab, and thinking about alternative means of structure that can be both sustainable and innovative and beautiful. And as I mentioned before, Rossetti, we have a particular specialty for sports architecture. These are arenas, they're training facilities, they're practice facilities. And a lot of them incorporate long span structures. And so I think our group of designers and people across our firm within the lab were kind of captivated by the use of MassTimber and long span and just frankly the design potential with it. So that has been our involvement so far.
Thank you, Paulina. And Todd Sandy with Michigan Carpenters.
Thanks. There I am. Yeah, so our goal here in getting involved with the MassTimber Conference was to prepare for delivering training to our members and contractors. And so making connections with industry reps, learning how to correctly install their products, just everything, from the manufacturing end to the actual installation practices for us was important. And we did make some great connections and got some really good partners out of this experience. So it was great to be involved in.
Can you say just briefly a little bit more about what training for MassTimber is going to look like within the Michigan Carpenters I think it's
Sure.
very exciting to hear about.
Yeah, so our international body has provided us with curriculum, but we've also, through our connection here with the conference, made a connection with Woodworks, and they have donated a training mock-up to our training center, and along with that comes their curriculum. We've also have partnership with other UBC councils that are currently training. And so we're gathering that information to deliver the best meaningful installation practices that we can. So it'll be a mix of what we have from all of these entities, but it's the fundamentals, the foundation, right onto the hands-on training in our shops.
Yeah, and it's impossible to understate kind of the capacity that that's going to help add for mass timber construction and building in Michigan. So, like I said, I'm excited about that. John Stimson with Homestretch, you alluded to kind of how you're engaging with mass timber at Homestretch, but if you could say just a little bit more here and why that engagement led you to go to the Mass Timber Conference.
You know, I've been a carpenter. I mentioned that Homestretch is a general contractor. Well, I was a carpenter for about 15 years, and I swung a hammer, and I have a reverence for wood. I think it's a great product. I love working with it and the smell of it and just all aspects. So my reverence for wood was intrigued when Steve Schnell up in Petoskey mentioned about the Mass Timber Conference. And I thought, what can we do to give Homestretch something unique? And, you know, a lot of what I've done in the past in my history through building is by innovation. You know, what can I do that stands out? And how can I use manufactured products that are gonna, you know, for gonna fuel our efforts and try to change the industry, because I know the industry is just so stuck in its ways. And 20 years ago, I used structural insulated panels, which are foam panels that were developed in the state of Michigan. But I used them on custom homes, and I thought, boy, someday I thought those would be perfect for more volumetric or squared structures. So I got out of it. But then when I heard about the mass timber, I thought, what is mass timber? And maybe I should look into it. And it met that same concept of volumetric design with structural insulated panels, but those are not really a commercial application for a tall structure, which is what we're participating on. So it was more of a fact-finding mission, see if it would fit something in our portfolio of structures that would bring something to the area that was new and sort of put us on the map. And that was really the impetus of why I went to the conference, just to learn more, to see if it would apply to any projects that we might do in the future.
And so Homestretch is looking very seriously at mass timber for an affordable housing project in Traverse City, which for the non-Michiganders is in the northern Lower Peninsula on the west side. And if built, you know, that would be the first mass timber affordable housing development in Michigan and the first in your county. And that's incredible.
Mm-hmm. It is, and it actually meets some of the height restrictions that we've been forced to toy with here. Traverse City has a group that is trying to, I guess, save our downtown. That's their motto, to not build, 10, 12, 13-story structures and obstruct the view. They want to keep it as a small town. So this 60-foot reinterpretation of our ordinance was literal. We could not have an elevator shaft protrude beyond 60 feet. We couldn't have the parapet around the first floor exceed that limit. You couldn't have a American flag pole or any antennas of any kind. So we were constricted to the 60-foot height limit. And I thought, what if the panels were able to meet that criteria and still maintain a 5-story structure? Because most developers of concrete and steel, and they're forced to lop off the 5th floor and therefore reduce their revenue. So the CLTs or the NLTs, the cross laminated timber and nail laminated timber is a smaller deck than a concrete or steel truss. And we were able, with our architectural firm that we solicited, to come within that 60-foot height and have an elevator shaft. So meet the 5-floor category that we had to have for our pro forma. And the panels, the mass timber panels met that specification. So very, very impressed with the ability to structurally go up at least 5 stories, and I know taller, but we'll I think have a successful project, at least meeting that ordinance and presenting it to the city for their support.
Yeah, fantastic. That's so promising. Thanks for sharing the story. Marc Blom, so if you could describe how would you characterize GM Longyear's engagement with MassTimber at this time, and why did you decide, you're very busy, why did you go to this conference?
Oh, as I said, I think it was a great opportunity. We're always looking at new investment opportunities, but also, other uses for the resources that we have in this great region that we're in. And so we were asked to participate in a grant with, I believe it was MDARD and Michigan Tech Smart Zone and MIFB, which they wanted to purchase a CLT press that could prove the use of hardwood lumber in our region, or hardwood timber, excuse me, in our region, in CLT. So we looked at that as an opportunity, again, something that's new to us that we could potentially get some insight into. So we did partner with, I believe it was 2 or 3 other companies, and did a matching grant to MTech for that press. And then just recently now we gave them another grant to go on and purchase a finger joint machine that they can utilize. So from our standpoint, we hiring the foresters, we partner with different universities, especially in our region with Michigan Tech, of course, being 2 hours away and being in the backyard of our hardwood lumber facility located in Houghton. We just viewed it as a good opportunity to start learning more. And when the MassTimber conference came up, again, thought it was a great idea to get out there and kind of see where this has been. And I had not been to one, and it was kind of eye-opening, all that is out there, and all really what we need to do to get, to more or less to get this as a viable option for building in the future. We're also looking at a real estate development project. Could be, somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple hundred homes a year absorption for a 5-year period. I'm sorry, about 50 homes a year, 200 homes total. But that could be where we're having pavilions and those types of common areas where we're looking at using mass timber, and in particular, timber that could be harvested from our region in some of those areas as well. So that's really the main reason is to learn more about it, partner with people, and hopefully this is a viable option for us in a short time down the road.
Thanks, Marc. And it's fun to hear all of you talking about kind of the projects you're working on or where you're based. And again, for the non-Michigan folks on this call, or new Michigan folks, this panel is based all over the state of Michigan. It's not just like they're concentrated in one urban area. Marc is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. As I said, John is in Traverse City, which is in northern Michigan in the Lower Peninsula. Traci's here in Lansing, the capital. Paulina's in Detroit, and Todd is in Wayland, which is kind of in the middle of it all, right? And so it's like, it's really exciting for me that the interest, and this proves out when we have a larger sample size, the interest is all over the state. And I'm tracking about 24 mass timber construction projects, or potential mass timber, I shouldn't say they're all happening, but projects that are very seriously considering or definitely using mass timber in Michigan. And they're everywhere. They're not in one single region, they're all over this state: Lower Peninsula, Upper Peninsula, urban, rural, suburban. Very cool. So next question here is, when you think back on your experience at the International Mass Timber Conference, and I did want to flag too that 2 of the founding organizers of the Mass Timber Conference are here on the webinar with us, Arnie Didier and Craig Rawlings. If you were at the conference, you saw them all over the place. And you see them online sharing content all the time as well. They're key leaders and influencers in this space. So guys, thanks for joining us. But when this group here thinks back on your experience at the International Mass Timber Conference, what key insights would you like to share with the folks who are here listening? And how are you applying these insights in your work now? Did anything come back and you're like, oh my gosh, this changes how I think about this? Did anything surprise you? So kind of that group of questions, and approach that how you wish. But I'm gonna, Marc, since you were last on the previous question, you're gonna go first this time.
So I think again, it was just getting it to put together. We really just again want to learn more about this, right, as it comes through to it. I think if you look at the conference and why we went to it again, and I think that's really what you're asking, why did we take the time, right? This 3-day event is out. It's important to learn of what's going on out there, and how could it be applied to what we're doing today. So that's really what it is, kind of along the same lines, but it's really a fact finding for us and trying to learn more about this industry as a whole.
So one of the things that you mentioned when we were prepping for this webinar was kind of coming from the forest industry perspective, and you're the only one on this call who really is, you know, what kind of things do we need to understand about Michigan forests as it relates to making mass timber here?
I think, you know, it's along the lines of course, everything we do is harvest sustainably, right? So what is it, FSC? Is it going to be SFI? You know, there is, you know, the thing from a mass timber standpoint, I think we need to understand is our forests are really made up of, let's call it about 60% plus hardwood, right? Hard maple and soft maple. Then you have oak, and then we, of course, we have the yellow birch, beech, oak, all those, white oak, those other species. But predominantly here in the Upper Peninsula, it is related. It is primarily hard soft maple and red oak. And so our biggest thing is we need to identify what can it be used for, right? And can it pass the strength test? You know, how does it compare to, you know, where most of the mass timber right now is being produced is Doug fir, you know, coming from, let's say, from Canada, or as I learned at the conference, one of the surprising things is 50% of it is coming from Europe. It's really for us, you know, how soon can we get that testing done and prove that the species we have in this region are going to be a viable option for mass timber?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that, you know, we at MSU are we're about to launch a supply chain analysis to help understand kind of some of that landscape and what makes sense here in Michigan. Okay, Todd, Sandy, with the Carpenters, key insights to share with the group. How are you guys applying them to your work?
Yeah, I think I'll echo just what Marc said on the fact-finding part of it. For us, you know, being new to the training side of this, we had to get our minds wrapped around what the expectations of the industry are and the acceptable practices. We had to, you know, learn all the different parts and pieces, and those partners and vendors that would help us present them to our people. So it was really just that. It was fact-finding for us, getting the information, getting our head wrapped around it. But I think for me, the key takeaway was the passion that's behind this effort, this industry, seeing people that are really dedicated to making this work and excited about it. That's what I really enjoyed about it.
Thanks. Was there anything that surprised you that you learned? Maybe something more technical, anything like that you would want to share?
I think the ease of construction really surprised me. I didn't really have the solid concept of it, but you know, kind of ends up being once it's manufactured and sent out to the jobs, it's kind of a big erector set. That was a big surprise to me. I didn't realize it became on our end, you know, something that was as easily adaptable as it is.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think that's often something that surprises people until when they first see like, oh, this is how it works. It is something very surprising and key benefit of mass timber, of course, as well. Okay, next up is John Stimson with Homestretch. Any key takeaways? How are you applying them?
Yeah, I piggyback on the fact-finding mission to see what mass timbers were all about, but I was aware of a company called Katera that went under, and I thought they were, you know, hitting the marks. They were going to progress and change the building industry, and they collapsed. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're doing mass timbers. So I thought, was this industry viable? Is there something wrong? And that was part of my interest of going to the seminar and taking the tours, and it was the tours of the factories that I enjoyed the most and got the most out of. I mean, meeting vendors was important, and how some of the parts and pieces are put together, and be able to purchase some of those or get some contacts. But the tour showing Timber Lab and how they're creating fasteners to join the wood components together, and not using fasteners. I mean, there was an element of joinery there too that I was surprised. And then to see how they've gotten around some of the fire rated problems that could be inherent with wood. And, you know, everybody asks me, well, if you're going to build out of wood, isn't it going to burn? Or, you know, if I set a fireplace with wood, it burns and it turns to dust. And I learned about the char rate and the factors of oversizing wood so that it actually protects itself under a charred situation. You know, concrete and steel still needs to be encapsulated with something, which is an expense, but this mass timber structure has that inherent quality. So that was an interesting takeaway. And glad to know that even the collapse of Katera, I'm sure all that equipment that went out is still being utilized, and the industry is growing. And then when I talked about the tours, yeah, we went to the Adidas headquarters, and what intrigued me about that tour was they blended concrete beams and some columns, but mostly beams supporting cross-laminated timber decks. So here you had a hybrid of the two coming together to meet certain structural criteria that they had with their design. And that to me was fascinating, that it could be blended in with other components. And on our project, we're looking at initially using concrete and steel podium and then putting 4 floors of mass timber on top. Our architect went and looked at the STEM building, and he came back and said, John, we've got to do the first floor in mass timber. This is phenomenal, the feel of the building. And if you can imagine the first floor commercial space having that mass timber, that was something that was exciting to him. So I think full circle, it made a lot of sense for me to go and be able to talk intelligently about it. And I think you can see I've demonstrated that just with this short amount of time that we've been speaking.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Thank you. You flagged a bunch of different important things. One is kind of really getting your head around that value added fabrication that's inherent and essential to mass timber being mass timber. It's so fun to see kind of the work in action at a place like Timber Lab, which we had the opportunity to visit. You also mentioned the fire resistance properties of mass timber. That 2-hour fire studies show that mass timber beams and panels will char on the external layers and actually protect the interior structural layers, information that you might not, just stumble upon. And then you also mentioned the Katera example of a company, of things not going as planned perhaps, and kind of what happens next. In the chat, Craig Rawlings just posted an article about what's happening with the Katera plant in Spokane, Washington, which is really important to know, and kind of the capacity that's going to come online as a result of that shift. But also the folks who were at Katera, many of them in leadership roles, are now leading the way in other companies that are working on mass timber. And so it's nice to know that, we often hear about, oh, a thing didn't go as planned, and that, and then it like colors our perception of the whole thing. And this is a case where no, there's still plenty of momentum and plenty of lessons learned, and also good knowledge built. So we move ahead.
I'm just glad I'm glad I did not invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in that. But there's other good places to put money too.
Right, it's an interesting space right now for sure. So thanks for that, John. And now Paulina, same question to you. What key insights can you share, and how are you applying these in your work at Rossetti as a designer?
Well, for Rossetti, we're in a position where we are relatively inexperienced when it comes to mass timber, but we're really wanting to learn more. And again, that we have projects in the books that are slated to potentially use mass timber. So I think one of the big drivers in attending the conference, and I was there also with a colleague of mine, Nick Peruski, who presented his research, was to essentially set ourselves up for success when we are pursuing and engaging with these projects with mass timber, knowing that we haven't used mass timber. So, and importantly, how to be able to navigate these really key discussions with stakeholders and clients and partners at the outset, because this is for many a relatively unknown building system, and it's incumbent on us, all of us, but especially us as designers, to be able to know how to talk about it, to understand what the value add is, what are the challenges, what are the cost implications, what are the code implications. So that was a huge driver in why we decided to attend the conference. And I think one of the valuable insights I gained personally from the conference, and to borrow a phrase that one of the speakers used, was to talk about this ecosystem of values. So when you're talking to a client, thinking about the intersectionality of the value provided by pursuing mass timber with all of their other set of values, whether we're working with a higher ed client or a sports client or a private client, what are their values, and how do we, if timber really is a good solution, how do we begin to tie those things together and be able to explain those linkages. I think I was also, what impressed on me about being at the conference was just the breadth of industries and professionals that were there, and the fact as working with MassTimber, you really have to, there's no other building system in which you're actually thinking about the managing of ecosystems in order to produce that material. And so that was a big takeaway for me. But yeah, I think we're still continuing to evolve our response and our kind of ethos when it comes to articulating and justifying, sustainability through MassTimber on our projects.
Yeah, those are such great points, Paulina. Thank you so much. Really understanding kind of the nuances and the holistic nature of a MassTimber project and how partnerships and collaborations are really key throughout the process is really important insight. And Traci with Clark Construction, I have a feeling insights and how are you applying them to your work?
So one of the main takeaways that I had from the conference, which feels like it was reiterated over and over, whether it was through the seminars that I attended or the tour at Timber Lab that others have talked about, which was phenomenal, and even through the conversations with the different vendors, is the importance of bringing trade partners on very early in the process, which we know from our experience on projects, we use design assist as often as possible on projects, and we know it's very successful. The trade partners have great information to share with the rest of the team to make the projects that much more successful. So that was probably the key takeaway, is just how important that is. And I know not every project lends itself to being able to do that, unfortunately. All the procurement strategies don't allow for that, but whenever possible, it helps. And Timber Lab talked about planning. So they do a lot of coordination all up front, and the projects are basically built twice, so virtually, and then again. And then they even showed the Portland Airport project where it's basically being built 3 times. So it's, virtually being built, then they're building it off to the side where they'll deconstruct and then move it and actually build it over an operating airport. That was really cool to see that process. So, and it just, all that planning allows for the faster installation when you actually get down to in the field. So that was probably the biggest surprise, like Todd had mentioned, is just the ease with which these go together. It's basically like an erector set at that point. So that was probably the biggest thing that surprised me.
Great. Thank you so much, Traci. I appreciate those comments and all of you for your answers to that question. A lot of valuable insights that hopefully the audience here is going to be able to take away. All right, now this is my last formal question, and then we'll move to some audience questions, and hopefully we'll be able to bring on a couple of additional folks who attended the conference and might have some insights to share. So if technology allowing, we're going to do that. So, but the last question for you all right now is, what research, tools, education, or policies, or anything else would help you and your employer in your MassTimber initiatives or investigations, depending on kind of where you are in the process? And I'd like to start with Todd Sandy with Carpenters on that question.
Sure, thank you, Sandra. So for us, I think, because we were hoping to reach out and create these partnerships, and we were very successful at this event doing this. But I think for us, what would be very helpful would be an industry resource guide that would help us understand, who the players are, who the manufacturers are, the distributors in the industry, and those, that are actively working in the MassTimber construction field. So if we had that at our fingertips, we could probably be quicker at our acquisition of partners in this endeavor.
Todd, you're in luck. MassTimber at MSU this summer will begin the process of producing exactly such a guide. So great. I will be reaching out to you to help me figure out what should be in it.
I have been heard.
You are heard. Next, that question, Traci, what would help you guys move forward with MassTimber?
So one thing that would be very helpful from the estimating standpoint is I do believe MSU is working on a calculator that would help us be able to calculate the total cubic feet of wood in a project that then equates to cost for the structural system, for instance. That would be very helpful. And Sandra, I know I had talked to you about possibly pulling together a list of many projects or all the projects in the United States and some of the parameters about those projects. So stories and total mass timber and cost and square footage. And there really isn't enough information to be able to use like unit cost estimating at this point. So it's, you know, we need to dive in deeper right now. So the more we can develop for that information, the faster that process will become and more accurate as well. So those would be helpful. And then just any and all educational opportunities and training opportunities. I know Woodworks is coming out with like a moisture mitigation manual, hopefully this year, and that'll be really helpful to understanding what goes into protecting the structures as they're being dried in. And you know, what costs we need to assign to those kind of general conditions and general trades as we're constructing. So that would all be helpful.
Great, good to know. I am taking notes, by the way, on these. Thank you, Traci. And then Marc, what would help Longyear in terms of research tools, education policies? I know you've touched on some of them. Anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah, no, I think it's really completing the research, you know, on Michigan hardwoods from our standpoint. You know, if we're going to look at a, you know, mass timber manufacturing facility in our region. But then I think it also comes down to, you know, building codes, you know, how fast can, you know, if they can prove CLT can be manufactured from, you know, Michigan hardwoods, then how does that apply, and, you know, how fast can the building codes be changed to adopt? I know you've been working with Senator McBroom, you know, on trying, because I know we're behind even on, I think we're on 16 versus getting to 18 for the building codes, and how do we get some of these things incorporated earlier so that, you know, once we prove this is viable, how can we start moving forward, even if it's from, you know, other mills outside the region? But again, just trying to get a track on it, not only Michigan, but throughout the US. So it's, I think that's really what it comes down to. So, you know, I reached out to Marc Rudnicki. I'm interested in seeing once they get the press installed and a few other things as to, you know, how does it work, and, you know, how long will the project take, and then how do we get those results out there? And then again, building codes, you know, how fast can we get those changed to be able to modify it, the structures with mass timber from Michigan.
Yeah, thanks for those insights. I appreciate that. And but for reference, Marc Rudnicki, for the audience, is the faculty at Michigan, is leading the research, which is super exciting stuff. And then with regard to our codes, yeah, Michigan, it looks like my internet might be unstable, so if I'm cracking up a little, I apologize. But Michigan is currently on 2015 version of the International Building Code. In our Michigan Building Code, it is currently in the process of working to adopt 2018, which includes some updates for mass timber. And there's a very large contingent of architecture, engineering, and construction industry stakeholders, as well as, you know, us here in the MassTimber MSU program and other collaborators who are talking a lot about, can we expedite the adoption of the 2021 mass timber elements found in the International Building Code from 2021? Can we expedite the adoption of those here in Michigan, as something like 11 or 12 other states have already done? So we're hoping we'll be able to see that occur as soon as.
And I think, and just to interrupt, and I think if it is there and it is viable, then, you know, then obviously you got to look at manufacturing some type of plant. And is that something we could have an interest in? Absolutely.
Yes, good, such good points. Thank you. John, in brief, any research tools, education policies that would help with what you're doing at Homestretch on mass timber?
Yeah, I'd piggyback on what you all said about the code compliance, but our city manager impressed upon me that you better check with your code office to make sure it's approved. And I said, it is. He says, you call him personally and make sure it is. And so that, I think, is an area that, like you said, the 2021 IBC should be adopted. Another thing that I would recommend is having access to this manual that was put out at the conference. And that was incredible. I read it from cover to cover, and I've even told other people that come by the office, here, take it for a couple of days. So I'd like reprints of that. That would be my request. Just going down the line, shipping. Can we ship product from the West Coast, economically to the Midwest? I think not. Can we get a manufacturing facility here in the Midwest? That would be paramount. I mean, if we work on this project and we're shipping product to Canada and then shipping a finished good back to Canada, it sort of loses some of its saleability, if you will. Although we'd use feedstock, as you say, from Michigan, I'd really push, number one, let's get manufacturing here, Marc. Put it to task and bring in as many investment dollars as you can to make it successful, so it doesn't go by the wayside. And I know that it would be successful because we've got timber that's here right in our backyard that's readily available and should be put to good use. And I want to say that there, my concern when I first heard MassTimber is, oh my gosh, we're going to deplete the supply of forests out there. And from the conference, I learned that the forests in the United States are growing at 3 times the rate that we can harvest it right now. And when I heard that, I thought, oh my gosh, we better go get those trees. We better go start harvesting, because otherwise they'll fall to the wayside like Europe through loss of beetle infestation or fire or just old decay. So that's kind of my closing. Get a manufacturer here in the state of Michigan, please.
And you're not alone in your sentiment, John. I've been so, in talking with folks in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, I've been so, I don't know why I'm surprised, but I've been so, I guess, struck by, almost to a person. People are like, well, yeah, we're interested in using MassTimber, but why can't we get it from this region? I mean, shouldn't we be using Michigan MassTimber? And I'm like, keep saying it. Keep saying that. All right, Paulina, you're going to bring us home here on this question. What research, tools, education, or policies would help Rossetti in its MassTimber adventures?
Yeah, I mean, again, I have to echo some of the things that the other panelists have said. A kind of working and regional contact list, which I believe we've already started as a part of the conference. Tools that can help us understand cost implications at a schematic level when we're talking to clients. And I think also just, from a sustainability perspective, advancing some of this research that can really cement MassTimber as a sustainable building alternative. So kind of covering the bases of, use of adhesives, for example, recyclability, creating a truly circular economy when it comes to MassTimber, so that we can really be able to say this is helping us to sequester carbon and tackle, climate change in a big way. And I know that I mentioned those specifically because I know that MSU is advancing those efforts. So I'm really eager to hear what comes out of those research efforts.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Paulina. Yeah, from the perspective of kind of that circularity of MassTimber products and in construction, we have a faculty member on our forestry faculty here at MSU, Dr. Michiganders, who's been developing and working to get to market adhesives for cross-laminated timber that are made of lignin, which is extracted from trees and is a more biodegradable, sustainable, renewable type of adhesive that is showing that it's stronger than current ones on the market and possibly significantly less expensive to produce and therefore buy and use. That's very cool. And then Dr. George Berghorn, who's going to join us in just a minute, and I have been talking a lot about how can we be thinking about designing and manufacturing MassTimber for the life beyond the building, the next life of the timber. So we're continuing to capture those carbon storage benefits longer, just basically extending the carbon benefits of forests and trees for as long as we possibly can. So great points. Thank you for those. Thank you for answering all of my questions. What we're gonna do now, if folks in the audience have some questions, feel free to type them into the chat. I do want to point out that Craig Rawlings has typed into the chat some resources. One is about the virtual portion of the International Mass Timber Conference that happened in May. So you can access that online. There's a PDF version of the 2022 International Mass Timber Report, which John Stimson held up in his remarks just now. So check out those resources. That's all very important. But now what I'd like to do, I added two people, Dr. George Berghorn and Shannon Lott, as panelists, so that they can kind of weigh in. They both attended the International Mass Timber Conference and have been leading on mass timber efforts from their seats here in Michigan for a long time as well. So George, could you turn on your camera? Hello, nice to see you.
Hello.
So this is Dr. George Berghorn. He's an assistant professor of construction management here at MSU, and he works with me as research director of mass timber at MSU, and has been working on mass timber since like 2016. So I wanted you to just weigh in briefly, George, based on what you've heard here and conversations maybe you had at the conference and just on a day-to-day in your work, what like 2 or 3 key changes are you seeing in Michigan since you started working on mass timber in 2016?
So, I mean, the easiest way to explain the change since 2016 is just the groundswell of not only interest, but the groundswell of knowledge that's come along with it. I think we're at a much higher base level of knowledge. And what I mean by that, if I contrast the kind of questions I got in 2016 to the kind of questions I get now, right? In 2016, it was, well, gee, isn't it gonna burn? In 2016, it was, well, this is cool, but we can already do light frame wood construction for 3-story commercial buildings. We do it all over Michigan. What's the difference? I wish I was exaggerating, right? 6 years ago, those were the questions. To today, it's, you know, from a contracts perspective, how do we figure out how to apportion who's saving costs in what part of the project, and how does that filter down through contractual relationship? What's the right project delivery mode to get this out? And if we're doing public procurement, how do we overlay design assist and design build into public procurement processes so that we get better project outcomes? It's, why is this connector concealed versus unconcealed, and what's going to happen if I go with an unconcealed connector versus a concealed? I mean, so the level of knowledge, the level of interest has just exploded in the last 6 years, and that's a good thing. It's really a great thing for us. So it shows us that people are serious about this. While code remains an issue of concern, it's not the killer of an issue that it was 6 years ago, because if nothing else, Michigan's at least going to adopt 2018, which is far more favorable to mass timber than 2015 IBC was, but we hope that they will adopt those 2021 mass timber provisions into the new MBC as well. But really, we've just, it's a roller coaster is how I sort of think of it. It's that we're on that slow uphill climb. You know, we're kind of like, man, we know it's coming. We know the fun, fast downhill part is coming soon. We're still kind of getting up there. And I really feel like we're at the point where we're about to crest that hill and really get off to the races with the work that we're doing. Think about what we've got going on at MSU today versus when we thought we were successful 6 years ago. And then I look at today, just adding up research funds and the partners that we've developed relationships with over the years. We're really close to that point where we're going to tip over the edge and start working faster, stronger, better together in the state.
Yeah, George, thank you so much for those insights. I think it's true. We can no longer fit kind of, even if we're just listing them briefly, or kind of what all the items in our research portfolio, we now need 3 slides, not just one. You know, it's like there's more and more every day, it seems like. And I also heard you describing kind of moving from this place of like knowing that mass timber exists and feeling like we don't really know much about this at all, to knowing more, but now starting to know what we don't know and how to ask for the knowledge that we need to move ahead. So that's a really important progress. And I think, you know, Now, Shannon Lott, if you could turn on your camera and talk to us for a minute, and I'll introduce you. This is Shannon Lott. She's the Natural Resources Deputy at Michigan Department of Natural Resources. And again, DNR is a key partner and funder of MassTimber MSU and all of the work we're doing, and a holder of a lot of the MassTimber vision in the state of Michigan. So Shannon, thank you for making time to join us. Can you tell us, how do you think the growing mass timber industry momentum supports the state of Michigan's mass timber goals, and how might DNR and other state agencies harness this momentum at this moment that George just described?
Well, thanks for having me, and great to see everyone again. I haven't seen some of you obviously since the conference, and I do have my Oregon shirt on that I bought there in the spirit for today, but you can't really see it. So to answer Sandra's question, we really started this because the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan that the governor signed 2 years ago has a goal for Michigan to be carbon neutral by 2050. So some people are like, well, why is DNR really involved in building stuff? Usually that would be some of our other entities in the state. However, this really links to our forest products industry as well, which I deal heavily with. And Marc kind of touched on this, Marc Blom, he touched on this earlier, that 69% of Michigan's forest, well, our state forest system, but then also our private forests, we have 20 million acres here, are hardwoods. So we're looking at some ways to utilize hardwood CLT in this conversation to promote forest products, but also to help in this carbon conversation. We thought about, you've probably seen some of the Wall Street Journal articles about that we sold some carbon credits on the state forest system. And I think somebody mentioned it here, how do we store carbon, or how do we measure the carbon storage in these buildings? And so we are building a new customer service center in the east end of the UP in Newberry, and that is slated to be a mass timber building and is in a design phase right now. So we are looking at some point, hopefully selling carbon credits off of that building as an example of how we can do this to help in that carbon conversation. So I got heavily involved with trying to put a team together early on because our administration said, we need to move the needle here, and we have the largest state forest system in the country. What are you going to do? So that's kind of how I got involved, and I put a bunch of folks together. George was on my beginning team. We hired Sandra. We put some money and muscle behind that. We figured we really needed a person to spearhead this in the state. So she has been great in contacts throughout the state and country, actually, to propel this forward. So we've got a lot of things in the hopper, as all of them have been mentioned. I think Paulina mentioned several of them. And then Marc mentioned some with Michigan Tech as well as Michigan State. So we're trying to harness the university piece of this too, and all of our partners. So we have stakeholder partners, we have industry partners, we have university partners. And then recently we have Finnish partners. Our governor signed an MOU with Finland, and they were just here 2 weeks ago. And we're talking with them about mass timber, mostly in the technology realm, where we don't really have like the press technology here in Michigan yet, where there are some throughout the country, but also Finnish companies have been working on CLT for a while. So we have invited them. They didn't come to the conference here, but we are also supposed to do a delegation trip to Finland in September. So we'll see hopefully some of those CLT plants in Finland and be able to talk about some of this technology as well. So I welcome all of you, which I always do when you hear me talk, to come to Finland with us as we put together our delegation. So anybody who wants to help in that endeavor. So I know we're running short on time, but that's kind of DNR's point of contact in this and why we're involved. So thanks for having me, Sandra.
Thanks, Shannon. Again, I really appreciate you being here and sharing all of that. It's really important for people to understand how much work is happening in Michigan on mass timber. And thank you for your ongoing leadership. It's wonderful to be able to partner with you. So with that, I want to encourage everyone to take a look at the chats before you log off this call, just to make sure that you have access to all the links and great information there. I'm gonna share my screen here again real quick because I have some kind of closing items to share. So first, I want to invite anyone from this call who's in Michigan to join our Michigan group at the 2023 International Mass Timber Conference. The dates are there, March 27th through 29th, a little bit earlier this year. If you want to do that and you want me to keep you in the loop about our group, feel free to email me, and you can see the website for the conference itself below. But with what I really want to do now is just thank all of our panelists. So Marc Blom, John Stimpson, Paulina Reyes, Traci Brower, and Todd Sandy, and to thank my colleague George Berghorn and Shannon Lott from the DNR for joining us today to share your insights about mass timber. Again, we will be recording this webinar so that you can spread the insights and expertise of this group far and wide, and I hope that you will do that. And you will be on the MassTimber MSU email list, so you'll learn about future webinars, and you'll also receive our newsletter, which comes out approximately. You're always welcome to contact me to ask questions about mass timber, if you want me to introduce you to somebody, if you need resources. I'm here to help you. My job is to help you with your mass timber endeavors, whether you're building with mass timber or you want to manufacture it in Michigan. But with that, thank you so much for joining this Mass Timber webinar. I think we've had a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.